It's wonderful to be here and to meet all of you virtually for this important discussion. Next slide. So last year, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report on climate change and land use detailed the growing threats of food and water shortages, nutritional deficiencies, and desertification. Not only is climate change a threat to the way that we produce food, but the way that we produce food is exacerbating climate change. It's a vicious cycle with dire consequences for the planet, and it will be impossible to limit temperature rise to safe levels without fundamentally altering the way the world produces food and manages land. With the global population growing to nearly 10 billion by 2050, the critical question is, how are we going to feed this population without destroying the planet? Next slide, please. Current trends do not inspire confidence. Population growth, urbanization, and the rise of a global middle class are fueling the demand for more food, specifically more meat, that puts greater pressure on natural resources. The supply chains we've built to meet these demands are degrading soil, accelerating deforestation, and reducing biodiversity at alarming rates. Degraded soil, deforestation, and reduced biodiversity, as well as greenhouse gases from our agricultural systems, are contributing considerably to climate change, which is in turn making crop yields volatile, decreasing the nutritional value of crops, increasing pressure on farming economies, and threatening food security. Lack of safe and nutritious food globally, but especially in poorer communities, is causing developmental problems like stunting in hundreds of millions of children. And systemically, the food we are producing from all of this activity is putting us at a higher risk of cancer, diabetes, infections, and chronic diseases. So how do we change the paradigm? How do we produce safe and nutritious food for the global community without jeopardizing our planet? How do we transform the food system into one that is more healthy, sustainable, and equitable? Next slide, please. At Food Shot Global, we built a collaborative capital investment platform to empower innovators, entrepreneurs, researchers, and advocates to do just that. The annual Food Shot identifies the most pressing obstacles to creating a healthy, sustainable, and equitable food system, and our worldwide consortium of venture funds, banks, corporations, universities, and foundations deploys equity investment prize funding to catalyze the success of global transformative solutions to critical food and agriculture problems. I want to focus on two areas that are critical for sustainability and resiliency and where major changes are needed. These are the issues we chose as the first two food shots because they represent key leverage points to shift the entire food system. Next slide, please. So first, let's consider soil health. Next slide, please. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization warns that the world has already lost about 30% of its arable land due to overly intensive and polluting farming practices. FAO estimates that we only have about 60 years of farming left if current rates of soil degradation continue. Intensive on-field practices cause over-reliance on chemical fertilizers and pesticides and unsustainable rates of soil erosion. 10 million acres of cropland are lost each year to soil erosion. There's an urgent need to shift global agricultural production systems from extractive to restorative practices that establish soil as the foundation for a healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable 21st century food system. Soil can be the medium for increased nutrient bioavailability, greater farmer profitability, and ecosystem restoration. In addition, increasing soil's carbon storage not only sequesters carbon, but it also makes crops more resilient to climate change, improves soil health, and increases crop yields. Next slide. That's why we made Innovating Soil 3.0 our inaugural food shot. In September 2018, we called for a new soil operating system, and we announced our first awards last June. After executing our inaugural food shot, we're in a unique position to identify critical gaps in the market. This allows us to do a deep dive on how to fill these gaps and to support best-of-class innovations that have the maximum potential for scale and impact. So in April, we launched Innovating Soil 3.0 Deep Dive, which focuses on three key gaps in soil health: soil carbon measurement, microbiome functionality, and rapid adoption of regenerative practices. This is the kind of long-term commitment to soil that we need to truly build resiliency and sustainability in our food system from the ground up. Next slide. So now let's turn to programs. Next slide, please. The ultimate objective of a successful and sustainable food system is to provide quality nutrition to all members of society. The recent Global Nutrition Report found that 1 in 9 people is hungry. An increasing number of countries have the double burden of malnutrition, obesity, and other diet-related diseases, such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. Last month, the UN warned that the coronavirus pandemic could double the number of people facing acute hunger globally. And critically, the report cites inequities in food and health systems as exacerbating inequalities in nutrition outcomes. Next slide, please. At the same time, environmental damage from agriculture, specifically the conversion of natural ecosystems to croplands and pastures to meet the growing global appetite for protein, is a major risk factor for increased contact between humans and animals, which in turn increases the likelihood of zoonotic diseases like COVID-19. With the world facing challenges from population growth, unsustainable consumption patterns, climate change, and pandemics, it's clear that the democratization of nutrition is the next frontier of food. We urgently need to innovate across protein sectors, including livestock, aquaculture and fisheries, agricultural proteins, and novel proteins like algae, fungi, bacteria, and insects. Next slide, please. We must work together to build a protein system that leverages science, technology, investment, and innovation to deliver the maximum benefits to human and planetary health while minimizing resource input. As part of a long-term commitment to nutrition, the Precision Protein Food Shot looks at protein systemically and with heightened rigor in order to build a protein system that is more precisely attuned to human and planetary health, better aligns global and regional supply and demand, increases accessibility, and decreases waste and environmental damage. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to touch on what resiliency and sustainability mean in the context of food system investment. Sustainability requires that farmers are profitable and can make a living. Resiliency requires biodiversity and supply chains that can withstand the shocks of pandemics and climate change. We need greater commitments and investments from institutional investors, multinational corporations, and governments to shift the multi-trillion-dollar global food system. The IPCC report proves that failing to invest in more sustainable systems would actually be irresponsible from a fiduciary perspective. Public companies are responsible to their shareholders, and those shareholders should know that their money is at risk unless we redefine business as usual. It is not optional to invest in sustainability via soil health and precision protein. It is a necessary risk management strategy to protect shareholders from the volatility that will come from climate change. There are some efforts to reframe risk in this way, notably the Biodiversity Index and the Kohler Fair Protein Producer Index. Once companies and their shareholders see sustainability as essential to their ongoing existence, maybe we can get the level of investment needed to make transformative change. And that would really be a moonshot for better food.